Well, the Super Bowl is over. We got a new champ, and congrats to Seattle. They definitely deserved it. And on the flip side, of course, we have a loser, and you got to question that New England Patriots team that we saw on that Super Bowl performance. Did they even deserve to be there? Chris, honestly, has there ever been a performance worse than that in a championship game?
Yeah, way back in 1940, my Washington Redskins somehow lost 73 to nothing to the Chicago Bears.
All right, look, I know we're a little older, but we're not that old, okay?
All right.
But look, we've seen a lot of Super Bowls. Remember some pretty awful performances. Let's see how it stacks up. The question is, are the Patriots that we just witnessed from the 2025 season and that Super Bowl, are they the worst team to compete in the big game? So let's just get right to it. Again, we're going to actually talk just Super Bowls, not like the championship games and like the pre-war times and all that. So, all right, Chris, can you think off the top of your head of all the big games that we've seen, has there been a team that just looked like it didn't belong there?
Yeah, there's been plenty, and I was actually, thinking about this because, of course, with how bad the Patriots looked, you start thinking about, okay, what Super Bowls. I think the ones like I've seen in my lifetime that I can think of that came right to mind were like the 2000 Giants. It was Kerry who I can't remember. I can picture the quarterback from Kerry
Collins.
Kerry Collins, yes. Kerry Collins. The 2006 Bears with Rex Grossman. The 1998 Falcons, remember the Dirty Bird Shuffle or whatever? It's like, how did they make it to a Super Bowl? But also, I was alive when the 1979 Rams played in the Super Bowl, but that was a team when I dug into it a little bit more. Probably had no business being in the Super Bowl. But then even teams like the 2008 Cardinals and the 2003 Carolina Panthers, the difference with those teams, the '08 Cardinals and the '03 Panthers, they actually were in the game. Remember, the '03 Panthers almost beat the Patriots, and the Cardinals were a crazy Santonio Holmes catch away from beating the Steelers. So, yeah, there hasn't been a lot of teams that, it feels like the Patriots, like, they're probably better than those teams I just listed, but barely, maybe?
Well, to me, you're right on all those counts. There's been a couple of Patriots teams, and of course, when you make the Super Bowl so many times, you're not always going to have one of the best teams. I think that was probably the second most painful game to watch in terms of just nothing happening, like nothing. Because you remember a few years ago, the Rams lost to the Patriots, and it was like 13-3. It was pure field goal. There was no offense there, right? That game was just no good. But I think you missed the most obvious one here, and this was the second Super Bowl I ever actually saw live when it happened. Yes, we're a little bit older here. So my Dolphins, I remember in 1984, right? Dan Marino just came on the scene, second year, made the Super Bowl, got absolutely trounced by the 49ers, right? This is the 49ers with Bill Walsh and Joe Montana and Jerry Rice. And then you're talking about the next year, the Dolphins were the best team in the AFC again, but they choked so hard. They lost to, wait for it, the Patriots. The Patriots finished third technically in their division that year, and yet somehow the Dolphins lost to the Patriots, and the Patriots, we all remember, got absolutely humiliated by the 1985 Chicago Bears, which we all consider one of the best teams ever, right? The best defense, arguably, ever. It's like either the 2000 Ravens team you mentioned that beat the Giants and Kerry Collins, or it's the '85 Bears. But I think we just ignore the fact that the Bears had their way with the Patriots because the Patriots did not belong there. I don't know how. I don't know what happened to my Dolphins that year, but Dan Marino, he just didn't look like himself that game, but their defense just rolled over. In fact, I checked it out. The Patriots ran for like 250 yards against the Dolphins in the AFC Championship game. They ran for more yards than Marino threw. And so the Patriots got to the Super Bowl there, and then they let the Bears just do whatever they wanted. Remember Refrigerator Perry? Remember him getting in the end zone and scoring a touchdown? I mean, that team had to be worse than this team, didn't it?
Yeah, I forgot about that team, honestly. Yeah, the '85 Patriots, that was definitely a terrible team. This Patriots team, maybe it's just because it just happened, but this Patriots team feels weird to me because, I said like all season, because of course, we do our fantasy football and we talk about things. We do our live streams, and sometimes when we're on our live streams, although we're answering, football questions, we go off on tangents. And I know multiple times this year I said that the Patriots are overrated. They're going to get exposed in the playoffs. I didn't realize they were going to get to play C.J. Stroud on the day he forgot how to throw a football, and that Bo Nix was going to get hurt literally on the second to last play in overtime, and they were going to get to play against Jarrett Stidham. I really thought, like, after they beat the Chargers, that would be it. They were going to lose. They just weren't that good. But because you look at it during the season, the teams they played during the season had a .391 winning percentage, which was the lowest since 1999, that Rams team. But that Rams team, remember, they had like one of the best offenses we've ever seen. But it's the third easiest schedule a team has had ever in the history of the NFL by win percentage. So, but that being said, like, they still beat some good defenses, right? I mean, the Chargers had a good defense, the Texans had a good defense, the Broncos had a good defense. So there was a part of me that thought, like, hey, maybe it's just the Patriots' year. Maybe they're going to go in there and somehow get like a fluky kick return or a pick six or something like that. But no, I mean, the offense completely disappeared. I mean, Drake May, he looked the way C.J. Stroud looked in that playoff game. Like, he honestly looked like a deer in headlights. I mean, really, for the whole playoffs, he looked pretty bad out there, and the defense just wasn't good enough to pick up the slack for the offense. So, but I still feel like this Patriots team, maybe because it's so recent, is better than those teams we've talked about. But maybe as time goes on and like it's not as fresh in our mind, we'll look back and be like, wow, this Patriots team was really, really bad.
Yeah, it's tough because exactly. I mean, it's fresh in your mind, and it was so bad. And look, honestly, I'm not obviously a Patriots fan, but I feel bad for Drake May because the kid he got to the big stage. It was a little much for him. Now we're also hearing that there was something like he had to get an injection, and maybe there's something with the AC joint. I don't know. Who knows, right? Everybody's banged up at this time of year, as they say, and he didn't look like he was physically unable to perform. I'm not going to blame injury, but I mean, he just wasn't ready. And this is, we talked about, young quarterbacks getting there. Sometimes they're just not ready. And I did see a stat, which reminded me of my boy Dan Marino, that, quarterbacks who get to the Super Bowl in their second season and then lose have never gone back again. It doesn't mean Drake May will never go back to the Super Bowl again, but is not guaranteed. You're like, oh, he has his whole career ahead of him. It doesn't necessarily happen again.
Yep.
I think he's a good quarterback, but I think there was just a little bit too much hype because, I mean, he performed well, but he didn't do anything amazing statistically. This offense wasn't exactly a juggernaut. They got by on the strength of the defense, but honestly, it's the schedule, right? Look, Denver was my Super Bowl pick, and you can't tell me, especially now, it seems obvious, but there's no way if Bo Nix plays in that game that Denver isn't beating New England, don't you think?
No, I think had the Bills beaten Denver, they would have definitely beaten New England. Denver with a healthy Bo Nix would have almost certainly beaten New England. I mean, again, like Drake May, he'd never completed 60% of his passes in any of the four postseason games here. I don't know how many fumbles did this guy end up with over the playoff run. I mean, 7, 8 fumbles, turning the ball over. And you brought up a good point here because I think a lot of times, and this happens in like every sport, right? You get a young team like the Patriots, they kind of overachieve. I mean, let's be real. Nobody had the Patriots in the Super Bowl before the season started. They won 4 games last year. They overachieve, and then what does everybody say every time? They're young. They'll have many years ahead of them, many chances to be back. Doesn't always work that way. It's very, very hard to get to the Super Bowl, to have that magical year like they had this year. So obviously not rooting against, like, I'm not a anti or pro Patriots here. Like, I've just kind of been neutral Patriots. Rooting for Drake May. He's still young. He seems like a good kid. But yeah, like you said, there is no guarantee just because he's young and made it to the Super Bowl that he ever gets back or ever wins the Super Bowl. So yeah, we'll see what happens here. But it does show the power of like Sam Darnold on the other side. Give him credit, right? Like, this guy rebuilt his career, kept chugging along, and now, he didn't do a ton in that game either, but it was good enough, I guess, to win a Super Bowl.
It was good enough. Well, he he didn't do what made it, and like you mentioned, is turn the ball over. And again, not to pile on, and again, people are going too far. Everything's always too far these days,
Right.
right? But you got to look. It says that out of playoffs, like total playoffs, not just Super Bowl, but playoff runs, Drake May had the worst statistical playoff run in terms of EPA. Number one in terms of negative 29.2 EPA. 2015 Peyton Manning was actually second, so tells you don't necessarily need good quarterback play to win. Rex Grossman, number three. Joe Flacco's up there, number four. Jared Goff, in that Super Bowl I mentioned where they couldn't do anything. And then, of course, your boy Kerry Collins. I just throw out one comp there. Joe Burrow, remember? They came close, got in the Super Bowl, and everyone's like, oh, this team, and Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow. And what have they done since then? Now we don't even know if Burrow wants to stay in Cincinnati and what's going to go on. It doesn't look like they are even close. So, yeah, nothing is guaranteed. Okay, so on the other side, though, what about Seattle? I mean, was it just that this defense was so good? Do we maybe need to give them more credit?
Yeah, I think Seattle is an underrated great team, honestly. Underrated great team. I'm not going to say good. I'm going to say underrated great team. Like, they were easily number one in DVOA this year, easily, better than anybody else. I think they were like seventh all time in DVOA. Of course, a big part of that was that elite defense, but let's not undersell this offense. Okay, sure. In the Super Bowl, the offense did not do a ton, but they were facing a very good, a red-hot Patriots defense. But during the season, I mean, JSN was Offensive Player of the Year, had one of the best receiver years. Sam Darnold was mostly great. I mean, they had two. Of course, they had that crucial. Of course, the game in the conference championship game against the Rams was huge because you lose, you go home. But the offense came through in that game, even with the Rams. With that, the Rams played them tough, right? The Rams put up points. The defense did not shut down the Rams, and still the offense came through and won that game. But really, what I think was even more important than that game was the game in whatever week it was, like week 11 or week 12, when the Rams looked like they were going to get the number one seed, and they were just looked like they were on their way to beating the Seahawks, and then they made that crazy comeback. I mean, they beat some really, really good teams. The NFC West, the 49ers, the Rams. Okay, you got the Cardinals, but every division has a bad team. Like, this was not an easy path for the Seahawks, and they made it look pretty easy. I do think they are an underrated great team. They're probably not going to ever be ranked as one of the great all-time Super Bowl teams because, it felt like a year where we didn't have those. They don't have like a star quarterback, and they didn't have to play like a Mahomes or a Josh Allen or anything like that. But man, they are a really, really good team.
And that's exactly why I think, like you said it perfectly, they're going to be underrated. There's no star power here. I mean, the quarterback, Sam Darnold, he was a joke for a while in the league. Nobody even knew where he was going to be playing quarterback this year, when the offseason began. And so there's not one guy you can point to. Like JSN, sure, he was the offensive player of the year, but come on, he's not a guy who has that name recognition. He's not like a Jamar Chase or a Justin Jefferson, right? People are just starting to learn who these players are. Even on the defense, it's not quite a no-name defense, but there's one guy, right, one star that you point to. Not really. Even the Legion of Boom from Seattle, years ago, they had Richard Sherman, who now is the face of TV on an NFL Network. He was the face of that defense, right? And so this is going to be kind of an underrated team, probably always, because there is not much star power to it. I think the best thing they've got going for them is the coach, who also is kind of a no-name coach. Like, he's only been there a couple of years, and Mike McDonald is not a household name. He's going to become one eventually, but he's also one of these kind of understated guys, and that's why this team they just did what they needed to do. And it's like you said, and I mean, go back to the first round, they didn't just beat the 49ers, they trounced them. And then they were able to beat the Rams not once but twice late in the season in a shootout, right? They were able to put up points when they needed to, and then against the Patriots, they were able to clamp down on defense when they needed to. They just did what they needed to do. So, I mean, you're right. We're probably not going to appreciate this team until much later when we look back on it and exactly what they did. So, I think now the question is, can they run it back next year? I mean, everything looks like it's going to stay in place. Is Seattle going to be the obvious favorite going into 2026?
I mean, they're probably the obvious favorite, but let me point you to the 2024 Philadelphia Eagles, who also we're
Hmm.
an underrated great team, right? A great defense, a phenomenal running game, a good enough passing game with a mobile quarterback. And then what do we see in 2025? They not quite as good. Injuries. I mean, it's so hard to repeat in the NFL. I know we've seen some teams do it. I know like Patrick Mahomes. Well, really, we got. I say we got spoiled. If you don't like the Chiefs or the Patriots, you're not spoiled. But I mean, we got spoiled by seeing like a guy like Tom Brady, just carry the Patriots to the Super Bowl every year, and then we've been spoiled right after him. We get Patrick Mahomes, who's carrying the Chiefs to the Super Bowl almost every year. But they're outliers, right? It's very, very difficult to do that again. To even if you stay healthy, it's very difficult to sustain that level of play in the NFL. So, I mean, yes, they're probably the favorites heading into next year because, I mean, who else would we really put ahead of them right now? But that being said, it wouldn't shock me one bit if they're not like just running away with it next year and people are going like, what's wrong with the Seahawks?
Always happens, right? And one thing, an important piece that's going to be missing. We already know Clint Kubiak. He's gone, right? He's going to be the head coach. Looks like for the Raiders, and he was a big part of it, right? Just getting this offense to work, getting Sam Darnold to actually be efficient when he needed to be, and we all cursed him on our fantasy season because he would not just give Kenneth Walker the ball, right? He's using Charbonnet way too much. I guess it paid off for them, right? Still a little irritated at him, but still, it paid off. Walker was fresh for the playoffs, and when they needed him, they leaned on him. Of course, there was some people making the joke like, if Charbonnet was still healthy, they're not winning that game because they would have given him the ball 15 times, and Kenneth Walker wouldn't be the MVP. You agree with that?
I mean, probably they really like Charbonnet, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, they probably still would have won the game. Are we? Look, I know. Credit to Kenneth Walker, he was great in that game. There wasn't really a clear, obvious MVP, but do we really think like Kenneth Walker is why they won that game? I mean, like, okay, if he runs for 80 yards, do they lose that game? I don't really think so. I think Seattle was just clearly the better team. And honestly, when you look at the score, you think like, oh yeah, they won, but it wasn't like I remember, like when I was back in, this is gonna date me, but like back in the mid 90s when I was in high school, it felt like every Super Bowl was a blowout, right? Like the Cowboys just rolling teams or the 49ers just rolling teams. And I know the score didn't show that, but if you watched the game, which I assume you did, it wasn't really close. It never really felt like the Patriots or like the Seahawks were in any danger or the Patriots had any chance to even win that game. So, yeah, credit to Kenneth Walker for getting the MVP, but I don't think they lose that game regardless of who is at running back, to be honest.
All right, so here's the question. You brought it up, and I've been dying to ask, and I'm serious.
Okay.
I'm at least 70% serious here. Should MVP have gone to the guy who scored the most points, and actually, from what I'm seeing, he had the most points total in postseason, regular season. You know what I'm talking about. It's the kicker, Jason Myers. He's the real MVP, right?
Well, I really thought the MVP, they should have just given it to the entire defense. They should have just said the Seattle defense is the MVP because yes, Jason Myers. I mean, if you're going to give it to an individual player, he probably did deserve it. You know who else kind of low key deserved it was the punter. That guy was nailing some awesome punts in that game. Like, how many times did they down him like deep in territory? Just even the punter was great for Seattle. That is another underrated thing about this team. They have elite special teams, and it shows you how important it is. But I really thought the MVP should have gone to the entire Seattle defense. But if you're gonna give it to a player, why not? Why not give it to the kicker? You can't. Like Sam Darnold was good but not great. Kenneth Walker was good, but like I think if Kenneth Walker, if the refs had like it's kind of crazy, the refs hadn't called a single penalty on the either line on either side, defensive or offensive, the whole game. And then in the final like 2 minutes, he rips out the long run. They're like, nah, bring it back. It's like, what? Come on, man, let this guy have his touchdown. But I mean, he had a lot of yards, but no touchdowns. Like again, do they really lose that game if it's Zach Charbonnet or if you just insert any average running back in there? I think they still win that game. So, yeah, why not? Give it to the kicker. Let's do it. Has the kicker ever won the MVP? Give it to the kicker.
Kicker sadly has not. We did have a kick returner one time. Desmond Howard won, but no kickers. It's not going to happen. Honestly, who is more valuable? He not only scored the points, but look, we want to dismiss kickers like they're just an afterthought. If he's not making those field goals, like you take away the points that that kicker is getting you. If you're not going down and getting points, that changes the field position. It changes the momentum. It changes so much. Honestly, I do think Myers probably deserved it. He'd set a record. We had a record for the Super Bowl, most field goals, I think most points and all that. Look, the guy broke a record. Give him the MVP. Why can't it be a kicker? You know what? I think they should right the wrong and just take it away from Walker and give it back to Jason Myers. All right. So we don't know what's going to happen with Seattle next year. We decided this Patriots team is one of the worst that has been in a Super Bowl. Do you think that this carries over to them next year? Is there a hangover here? Is this team just like does this team have a chance to get back to the big game because Drake May enters his third year? Maybe they fix what was broken, or do you think this affects them?
Well, I'm going to get a bunch of hate from Patriots fans now, but I think there's a better chance they miss the playoffs than they get back to the Super Bowl. I mean, that might not even be a hot take because it's hard to get back to the Super Bowl, but again, they're not going to get the benefit of this easy schedule. Yes, with all due respect, they are still going to get your Dolphins and Jets, twice each a year. So that's probably 3 to 4 wins right there. But they're now going to get one of the toughest schedules this year, and we're going to have to see. Remember that defense did not really start playing like an elite defense till down the stretch. Can that defense sustain this through a full season? How will this affect Drake May? I really think the Patriots are going to be, like Patriots fans are going to be a bit disappointed next year. Although that could change. Look, that could change. Again, they have to address offensive line, and they have to bring in a wide receiver. Like all due respect to Stephon Diggs, he was once one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. He's not that guy anymore. Kayshon Boutte, Kyle Williams, Demario Douglas. No, they need to somehow bring in a true number one wide receiver, and they have to address that offensive line.
Yeah, yeah. Again, not to pick on a guy, the guy who probably getting more hate than Drake May even is what Campbell, the offensive lineman. He just wasn't letting anybody, he wasn't protecting anybody, keeping anybody off of Drake May's back. So I'm sure they will address that in the offseason. But we'll see what happens. I mean, hey, another season down. That means it's time to look forward to 2026. We'll see what else changes here going forward. If for some reason you have not yet subscribed to the channel, it's a good time. Take a second to do that. And don't forget, we have a Dynasty channel for those of you who there is no off season. So check out the Dynasty Endgame as well.